What's up, guys? It's Joe, and welcome back to our Week 7 matchups video, joined as always by Luke. And also a reminder, if you haven't yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. You got to go on Underdog, use code ANALYST, master your first deposit up to $100. We put out our picks yesterday. We got almost all of them right. Two of them were wrong. I had the under on, I think, catches for Foster Moreau and the catches on Rashid Shaheed. But other than that, everything else was right. So we were right there and getting another perfect week. Speaking about that, this Thursday night game, Luke, I think it's time to admit that we were wrong. We were wrong about Alvin Kamara, whatever you want to call him. We expected this to be kind of a messy backfield. They finally have receivers like Chris Olave, Michael Thomas healthy now. I don't think we expected Kamara to demand 13 targets a game or whatever he's demanding right now. So I think we got to bite the bullet on that one. Kamara is a running back one going forward. Travis Etienne also scored 2 touchdowns. It seems like a weekly thing for him. He's been playing out of his mind. But someone who has not been playing out of his mind, you know who I'm talking about. Our friend Calvin Ridley. He was one of our darlings going to this season. 1 catch for 5 yards. He had a rushing attempt for 0 yards. He had 4 targets total, only caught one of them. If he caught the rest of his targets, then he could have been at least a respectable game because a lot of those were deep shots. But Luke, what do you do if you're a Calvin Ridley owner? Do you panic? Do you sell? Do you bench? Do you hold? What are your thoughts? And you are a Calvin Ridley owner in a good amount of leagues, so it's a good person to ask.
In a nice amount. Yeah, I guess not so nice amount. I'm certainly panicking, but I have been for a while now. This made it 10 times worse because it looked like he was starting to sort of climb out of that rut. But no, was just reverting back. I mean, what was he like? The Jags wide receiver 4 in this game, production wise, and 1 catch, as you said, for 4 yards. It's just not looking good. That being said, you don't want to sell at a point like this where you're going to get nothing for him. But I don't know. He was starting in a lot of my leagues this week, and I can't say I'm comfortable doing that going forward.
And as far as panicking goes, Chris Olave, hit or miss over the last couple weeks. Are you panicking on Chris Olave? Are you buying Chris Olave? Are you holding? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, we were wrong with Alvin Kamara. He's been the guy getting all the targets since he's come back, and it has taken a hit to Chris Olave's value. I don't think his situation is as concerning as Calvin Ridley's because he's still the number one, receiver on that offense outside of the running back room. And he does seem to have a nice floor of volume. And right now, his value is probably at its floor for where it's going to be for the rest of the season. So if we're looking at Chris Olave, I think he had 7 catches yesterday. That's a good amount of catches in a game that sure may have had a positive game script, but Alvin Kamara was back. Jamal Williams was back. He didn't do much. Derek Carr is looking healthy. I think we can expect this sort of game script a lot from New Orleans going forward. So Chris Olave, I guess he's a light buy. I'm not, throwing my premium assets to try and go get him, but I think his value is at its floor right now, and you can make something happen when a player's at his floor like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it in terms of like he's not a heavy buy. Like now is not like, make sure you go get him. But he's at a good point to where if you did, could be beneficial. He's at his floor, as you mentioned. So, all right, Luke, we don't have too many games to go over this week because we got 6 teams in a bye.
A lot of buys, yeah.
Works for us. We'll have a shorter video. But let's start with the Ravens at the Lions. So, currently, right now for the Ravens, Zay Flower has a 29.4% target share. He is a weekly starter at this point. I think he's only really had 1 down game the whole season. He just had his first touchdown last week. So Zay Flowers, if you have him, feel free to put him in your lineup each and every week. Outside of that, Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman have been outsnapped by Nelson Aguilar over the last 2 weeks, believe it or not. So Nelson Aguilar has moved up to the wide receiver 2 in this offense. I think you can safely drop Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman at this point. We know what Mark Andrews is, and the running back room is still a mess. It seems to be a Gus Edwards and Justice Hill split. My fantasy darling, Keaton Mitchell, his first active game this past week, he did not receive any offensive touches. He did do pretty well on special teams. But Harbaugh came out and said that they expect Mitchell to get involved in the offense soon. And the way they talk about Mitchell, it makes me seem like they're really excited to kind of see what he can do. It just the way the demeanor that Harbaugh talks about him of like, yeah, we're getting ready to ramp him up. We're going to get him more touches. He'll see some more touches soon. Like they're excited about what Keaton Mitchell can bring to this offense, and I think it's only a matter of time before he starts to get a significant amount of touches that it's worth it. So if you have the room to stash him, I think now is the better time than ever to kind of stash him on your bench. If you have a shorter bench or in a league like that, there's still a chance he doesn't pan out. So obviously, don't make that move. But on the Lions side of the football, Jahmyr Gibbs has been described as a full go this week. Dan Campbell literally, and I quote, said, "I'd like to say that we're going to be careful with him, but the reality is that we need him." Luke, is this coach speak, or is Jahmyr Gibbs going to pull David Montgomery?
I'm leaning towards the side of coach speak here. I do think he'll probably be, a good starting running back option, especially with all these teams on bye. There aren't too many good starting running back options to begin with, and we have 6 teams off this week, I believe. So if I have Gibbs, I'm starting him in all likelihood. But I can't at this point expect, the bell cow workload. I think Dan Campbell actually used the word workhorse when describing what was going to happen this week. I just can't buy it from him at this point. They've been saying, oh, we're going to ramp Jahmyr Gibbs up as the season goes on. And if anything, his touches went down before he got hurt. I just can't trust it. He's not like someone I'm going for in DFS, for example, where his price is probably going to be sky high with all of this hype heading into the week. But in your fantasy lineups, probably going to be a good RB2 play.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think the frustration comes from drafting Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall and then calling him a change of pace back behind David Montgomery before Montgomery gets hurt. So, I feel like Dan Campbell's very in the moment. And I think that kind of proves that, calling Jahmyr Gibbs a change of pace back and then calling him their bell cow, like literally a week later. David Montgomery was playing lights out before he injured his rib. He has a cartilage injury. And guys, if you want to know more about that cartilage injury, I think we have enough followers on YouTube to where I can link past videos. There's the screech. So we can link past videos. So I'm going to put somewhere over here the video we did with Fantasy Docs talking about that. And you guys can see all of what we talked about with Dave Montgomery's cartilage injury. Outside of that, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta looking good. No reason to not put those guys in your lineup this week. Next up, Bears versus Raiders. Oh boy, this is the most exciting matchup we've seen since the Bears played the Broncos. For the Bears side of the football, Tyson Bagent is going to – I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I don't even know if that's his name. Bagent? I have the notes here, but it's Tyson Bagent. Yeah. How wonderful. So he's going to be starting. You got to downgrade all these starters, especially Cole Kmet and DJ Moore. Running back wise, Roschon Johnson, he's got a concussion. He's still in the protocol from about a week and a half ago. He did not practice Thursday. I've been waiting for an update, but we have not gotten one. D'Onta Foreman played 61% of snaps last week, and he had 16 touches. He would be the running back start if Roschon Johnson does not play, and this is against the bottom 10 run defense. Is there anyone on the Chicago side of the ball or the Raiders side of the ball that you're particularly interested in this week?
Particularly interested in? Definitely not. This is one that I'm going to be staying away from. I do think this is a decent get-right spot for Davante Adams with Jimmy Garoppolo out as well. Whoever the backup is going to have to feed Davante. I mean, we saw Aiden O'Connell sort of split with Davante and Jacoby Myers in the one game that he played, but it was pretty clear blanket guy to throw to. So I think regardless of who the quarterback is for Vegas, they will be looking Davante's way at some point.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, cool. And I think one name that we want to kind of keep an eye out is Michael Mayer. Yeah. So Michael Mayer, his snaps improved from 51% to 66%. to 81% over the last 3 weeks. He's becoming a solid starter on this team. Last week, he had a 78.6% route participation rate, and the week prior, he had an 88.9. So as his activity continues to improve and his involvement continues to improve, he's a guy who I'm looking to stash. And I was talking to someone about this the other day in terms of, Roschon Johnson officially out. Roschon Johnson officially out for Sunday's game. So Deontay Foreman, congratulations if you have him. He's in a good spot. But Justin Fields also out. So yeah, he's looking like a guy who I want to stash on my bench because my strategy has always been good starting tight end, and then you can use that spot on your bench to hold on to a good high upside backup tight end. Right now, I have a league where I have Mark Andrews and Dalton Schultz, and I've been talking to a couple people about trading Dalton Schultz to a team who needs a tight end and just kind of improving my roster that way. So Michael Mayer is another guy who you can kind of keep on that bench, and when the opportunity's right, trade him or trade your starter if you feel comfortable. I did the same thing with. I ended up adding Sam Laporta off waivers, and I had George Kittle. I traded George Kittle and another receiver, and I got AJ Brown. So, anytime you could do something like that, you're in a good spot. Next game we're going to talk about is the Colts versus the Cleveland Browns. Luke, talk to me a little bit about this Colts backfield with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. Which, if either, are you excited about or starting going into Week 7?
Yeah, so I think this backfield has been going just about as we expected upon Taylor's return. He has slowly been ramping up the snap count. I think we're eventually going to see, like the 70-80% range of snaps for Jonathan Taylor. And that makes him a borderline fantasy RB1, maybe high-end RB2. We'll see how it goes now that Anthony Richardson's out for the season. And I do think that that's a boost in some way because the sort of goal line touchdown vulturing factor is gone now. I don't think they're going to be, at the 6-yard line running it in with Gardner Minshew very much. So that, raises Taylor's upside a little bit as far as touchdowns go. Zach Moss, he is a handcuff, and he does have some standalone value as one of, if not the best handcuffs in fantasy. I know he's a top 10 fantasy running back right now, doing pretty much playing every snap without Jonathan Taylor. But now that Taylor's back, we're seeing his snaps go up. I don't think Moss is going to have much more work than, say, a quarter of the snaps on a week-to-week basis, if not less. So I'm not excited about Zach Moss's future. Again, he is a handcuff. If you like stashing those, maybe you could trade him to the Jonathan Taylor owner if they want the handcuff. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor is the guy I want.
I guess my only concern with this backfield, and we've seen, as you mentioned, that Jonathan Taylor has been from 15 to 42 snaps, and he went from 7 to 13 touches. And Zach Moss just the opposite: 80 snaps to 50% of the snaps, 25 touches to 13 touches. So they're both trending in opposite directions. Is there a point though where they kind of meet in the middle, and rather than continuing to trend that way, does it stay a 50-50 type of split? Or, as you mentioned, does Jonathan Taylor kind of take that step up and they keep trending in the way that they're trending? So I think this week's going to be pretty important to kind of figure that out. I'm going to be really interested to see. It's a pretty tough matchup against the Browns defense as a whole, who's been very good this year. We saw them literally, I'm going to say, single-handedly beat the 49ers last week, the Browns defense. So a lot going right for them. Now, outside of that, not really too much to talk about from the Colts side of the football. The Browns are allowing the least amount of points to fantasy wide receivers, so slight downgrade for a guy like Michael Pittman. Josh Downs playing 80% of the snaps from the slot. I'd imagine Minshew is going to be under a lot of pressure. Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor had 6 and 7 targets last week, so he's going to want to dump the ball off just as he did last week. Downs in the slot, Moss and Taylor out of the backfield are going to be the go-tos for that. And I think, Minshew is going to be forced to pass the ball a lot this game as well. So Downs, even though it's not a great matchup, still very playable to me. Oh, also just got another update. Jamar Gibbs said it felt weird to miss those 2 games. Now that he's back, he's embracing the role of being a 18 to 20 touch a game running back without Montgomery. I don't know. How much more clear can they just kind of lay it out that they want Jahmyr Gibbs to be the guy this week? How fun is that? Brown side of the football, Deshaun Watson trending in the right direction to play this Sunday. Colts are allowing a ton of points to opposing wide receiver ones. I think Amari Cooper is pretty much a smash play, even if Watson does sit with PJ Walker. Is Elijah Moore someone you're only interested in if Watson plays, or is he someone who you're just, yeah, he hasn't done anything crazy this year?
He hasn't, and I think I've seen him waiver wire in a bunch of leagues that I'm in, and that's someone that I have been dashing in case. I am only interested in him if Watson plays, but when Watson's played, he's been really right up there with Amari Cooper in targets. I mean, they were going back and forth, like one would have 10, the other would have 9, one would have 9, the other would have 8. They were really like a 1A, 1B, but not even that, more like a 1A, 1A situation there. They were really just splitting a lot of the targets. So I do think there's a role for Elijah Moore in that offense to be fantasy relevant.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's going to take Watson kind of hitting his upside in this offense, really starting to hit their stride as well. The running back room, Kareem Hunt had a big game, but I think that really just had to do with him being used more with PJ Walker in there. So I'm not buying too much into that. Next matchup, honestly, really not much to say here, especially from the Patriots side of the football. Pains me to say it as a Patriots fan, but do not start anyone in this offense. Kendrick Bourne coming off a good game. But like, look, I'm not relying on that. The one positive is that the Patriots did score a touchdown. Hooray! Stevenson got hurt, and he ended up missing a drive or two, which led to that Ezekiel Elliott touchdown. But he still had one of his best games, even with missing a little time during this game, with 65% of the snaps and 15 touches. So Stevenson hopefully starting to look up. He did see a good amount of targets in this game as well. So we'll have to see that keeps becoming a trend. On the Bills side of the football, with James Cook, he had the same amount of snaps as Latavius Murray and only 2 more touches. So James Cook was looking like a workhorse in this offense in the first couple games, and now he's doing in a 50-50 split with like I think the oldest active running back in the league with Latavius Murray. So beyond me, but that's about it here for the Giants and Commanders. Luke, talk to me a little bit about Saquon Barkley. He played 78% of the snaps last week, 28 touches. Do we trust him going forward?
Yeah, and I think while the Giants' offense, I don't think it could get any worse than it has been the past few weeks. Daniel Jones looks like he'll be back soon enough. I don't know how much of an upgrade that is, but it's something. Andrew Thomas must have been the rock that was carrying this offense all of last year because they just look atrocious without him. So without all these pieces in place, the Giants don't really have much other than Saquon, and that gives him the usage floor of like the RB2-ish like range that we saw from him last week. But I do think when the offensive like mainstays start to come back, Saquon can't. Like teams can't just put 11 players in the box to stop the run on Saquon, and I think his upside will increase from there. But I do trust him. This is a decent matchup, not because I think the Commanders' defense is bad, but because this game will probably be close. It's a divisional game. The Giants and Commanders have had some of these battles in recent years where, it's like low 20s scores, but the players get yards. Terry McLaurin seems to always pop off in these games. So I do think Saquon is more than startable this week.
And on that same note, Terry McLaurin had a 54% target share last week. Not something I think is going to continue. I think it was just kind of how that game ended up going that week. Daniel Jones not been cleared for contact, so he's not trending in the right direction. Could be the Tyrod Taylor showdown, which he didn't look too bad last week. I mean, he was holding the ball when he shouldn't, and they messed up the clock at the end of the first half. But for the most part, as far as moving the ball goes, he was actually pretty effective, or at least more effective than they have been this season. So Justin Pugh might have helped a little bit there. But Saquon did look better as the game went on. I think he had a lot of his big runs towards the end of that game, which makes sense when you're coming back from a major injury. Might start off a little slower than usual. Defenses get more worn down as the game goes on. But yeah, so I think Saquon is in a good spot. Brian Robinson also has a good matchup. Giants are allowing the 7th most points to running backs. So something to keep an eye out. He did have a bounce back game last week as far as snaps go, so he can continue that this week. Did you see the clip of Jahan Dotson doing holding I think it was he was being the holder for the field goal? What the hell is up with that? I mean, I know he's not been playing great. He's looked a little sluggish on his routes, but has it gotten that bad with Jahan Dotson? And it goes without saying he should be dropped if you have him in whatever leagues.
I don't know. Me being delusional, but I'm holding out some sort of hope that maybe they're running some like fake play, fake field goal holder or something. But yeah, that's just weird. I don't know if I've ever seen something like that before. And we also got the news the other day that Patrick Mahomes is the Chiefs' backup punter right now, which I think sort of falls in the similar basket there. Yeah, just I don't think I've ever seen a position, especially a wide receiver, using their hands, more than any other position. I don't think I've ever seen that, the wide receiver holding at all.
Not good news. Not good news if you're Deshaun Dotson. And if the long play is that he holds if he's the holder for 3 weeks and then they finally do that fake field goal, it still won't be worth it. Next game here, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Atlanta Falcons. This is their last 1:00 game. Just a couple notes from my side here is that Mike Evans didn't look great last week, but he still had 9 targets. So Mike Evans is still in a good spot. I think if you were able to buy low on him, then I think you're still in a good position right there. I'll trust him this week against Atlanta. Usually division games, Mike Evans has some against outside of the Saints. Mike Evans usually has good games against divisional opponents. Rashad White dominating the snaps, but that's about it. He's not dominating anything else. He's very inefficient. I don't know if I'm comfortable trusting him this week, but if you, again, like as you mentioned before, 6 teams in a bye, you really don't have too many options. Luke, talk about Kyle Pitts. You wrote about him in the buy sell article this week. You told me you wanted to name the article. This is the week Kyle Pitts actually did something. What's the outlook here? Because the Falcons are passing the ball to tight ends more than any other team in the league. I just released our 6-week positional target post, and we had the Falcons are passing to tight ends the exact same amount, or pretty similar amount to how they're passing to wide receivers. So, what are your thoughts with Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, they're passing to tight ends way more than anybody else is in the league, and they're passing Smith more than they are to Kyle Pitts. So I don't know. I just don't want to deal with it. And now, granted, there aren't too many tight ends that you do want to deal with this season. I will say that's a little bit of a silver lining if you're somehow watching this video and at the same time a Kyle Pitts owner, because I don't think anybody who follows our page is very excited about being a. Now, you may be like me, playing in a league with a bunch of our friends, and Kyle Pitts falls into like the 14th round, and I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll just do it. Still haven't started him once this year. I just want to deal with it. But he did do something last week. You're right. He did something. I don't expect it to continue, at least consistently at all. But I will say this is just about the most promise I've felt about drafted him.
So. A false sense of promise for sure. Next game here, we got the Rams versus the Steelers. Now, something I want to talk about is on the Rams side of the football is this running back room. So there's just a report from Sean McVay. Sean McVay said that there's going to be about maybe 3 or 4 running backs in rotation for this upcoming week. This is typically an offense that feeds the running back one. But in this particular instance, I'm not taking a chance in this matchup. The Steelers aren't amazing right now as a defense as far as allowing points to different positions. But Zach Evans is not guaranteed to be the running back one in this offense. One. They brought Darrell Henderson up, who is familiar with the team. He's going to be in this offense. Royce Freeman potentially could be another piece in this offense. We know Ronnie Rivers and Kyron Williams are going to miss some time. But I don't think Zach Evans is guaranteed anything. And if you're able to kind of avoid starting Zach Evans this week, if you don't have to take that unnecessary risk, then I would say don't. but don't put him in expecting some huge game. Also, ever since Cooper Kupp came back, it seems like even Kyron has been non-existent in the passing game over the last couple weeks. So don't expect any passing volume to this running back room that's already going to be split. So if I have Zach Evans, I'm sitting him if I can. Anytime you can step back and analyze the situation before throwing a player in there, I would definitely do it. Think about Amari DiMercado from last week. A lot of people were riding high off that 77% snap usage the week before. Might have started him and paid the price for it. So if you can wait on Zach Evans, wait. Other than that, Puka Nacua had a 26% target share last week, so not off that train at all. Luke, talk about Deontay Johnson coming back into this game and what that could mean for George Pickens. Pat Freiermuth also out this game. He apparently retweaked his hamstring injury on Thursday. He could still miss a little more time.
Yep, I'm very excited. Deontay Johnson was one of my guys this offseason. I think that Matt Canada, for all the flack he gets and we give him, he does let Deontay Johnson play some football. He may not let George Pickens play football, but he lets Deontay Johnson play some football. So I'm excited to see him come back, especially against this Rams secondary that's pretty poor. I think he's going to be a full go. I'm starting him in the leagues that I have him in this week. And as for George Pickens, I do think they can coexist, and I think weirdly Pickens' target share will go down, but I think that may help his fantasy value because I think the explosive plays will be able to come more often now that teams are shifting their focus to Deontay a little bit. By no means is he a consistent start, but I do think Pickens is startable as well this week.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, this is a game where they're going to be forced to pass the ball. The running backs for the Steelers have done next to nothing this season, partly due to the play calling, partly due to the offensive line. Who knows? But stay away from that running back room, lean on those wide receivers, especially with Pat Freiermuth also out. Moving on to our next game here, Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals. A lot of interesting things on Jackson Smith-Njigba. He averaged 5 yards a target in the first couple games, which is not great. But in week 5, he saw a season high in snaps, 53 snaps. He saw a season high in route run percentage, 81%, and average depth of target with 7.4. Part of the reason Jackson Smith-Njigba was not involved early on is because the Seattle Seahawks had a lot of offensive linemen who were hurt. So similar as we talked to with the Texans, the Seattle Seahawks were running some 2 or 3 tight end sets early on to kind of make up for not having those offensive linemen available that would have these guys blocking. And then Jake Bobo, who Matt Harmon famously said pretty recently, he ran a 4.99 and he was playing snaps over Jackson Smith-Njigba because he's a good blocker. And when you have that missing offensive lineman, you have to make up for it somehow. So that all factored in, as well as Jackson Smith-Njigba dealing with a wrist injury early on, to him not playing the snaps that he should have gotten. He missed, Geno Smith missed him on a potential 30-yard touchdown last week, and he's only looking up right now. So if you have your opportunity to buy low in Jackson Smith-Njigba, I would do that now. Also, those stats about his season high came from Roto Street Journal. So shout out to him for providing those, and Matt Harmon as well for the info on Jake Bobo and the offensive lineman. But yeah, interesting stuff on Jackson Smith-Njigba, encouraging for the future use. On the Arizona side of the football, the only thing I want to mention is Jonathan Gannon's quoted saying, "We'll see how we want to divvy up those carries for the running backs, but I feel good about that whole room." So just when we thought maybe Keontae Ingram was going to be the guy, it's not Amari DiMercado, maybe it's Damian Williams, it's still a messy situation. So don't go in expecting any of these guys to really benefit. Anyone else on the Seattle Seahawks side of the football that you want to talk about?
Nope, Jackson Smith-Njigba is pretty much the interesting guy here. You're starting Metcalf, you're starting Walker.
What about Lockett? Do you feel comfortable? From what I remember, Lockett historically has huge games against Arizona. It's like one of those weird things where like he just goes off. So let's do another would you rather, because that worked out very well last time with Stevenson. Would you rather start Tyler Lockett or Jordan Addison?
I think I'd lean Addison.
Tyler Lockett or Deebo Samuel?
I'm going Lockett.
Still going Lockett. Okay. Tyler Lockett or Devontae Smith?
I like Smith. The talent's too much for me to bench still.
And then in that same kind of wavelength there, Tyler Lockett or Jalen Waddle?
I think I'd lean Waddle as well. His target share has been going up.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Um, on the flip side of the football, Marquise Brown. He's got a great matchup against Seattle Seahawks. They're giving up the most amount of points to opposing wide receivers. He's had 10 plus targets in 4 out of his 5 last games. Kyler Murray, also rumored to be back, whether it's next week or the week prior or the week after, to this quarterback room. He comes in when Marquise Brown is a wide receiver one. Luke, is now the time to buy Marquise Brown and the rest of the players from this offense? Do you expect guys like Michael Wilson, maybe even Rondell Moore, Zach Ertz, who kind of had a hot start and fizzled out a little bit late, to kind of see an increase in value?
I think I would argue that the time to buy Marquise Brown was a couple weeks ago. But yes, now that it seems like Kyler Murray's return is imminent, I'm very excited for rest of the season outlook for Marquise Brown. So if you still can get him at a premium price, I would jump on that while you can. As for the rest of the guys, not too much excitement. I do think Zach Ertz will become a little bit more consistent, which matters this year for tight ends. So he's another sort of low end, weekly, could be guy at tight end.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I mean, we didn't know if we were going to see Kyler prior to the season. It was kind of iffy. But and I think the point was made. I don't know if it was Rappaport or Schefter who reported it, but the reason the Cardinals want to play Murray is because they want to see what they have. If he comes off the ACL and he plays very well, it kind of eliminates their need to draft a quarterback next year. And if he comes out and he does okay, or he doesn't play up to expectations, then he's trade bait for another team and they can draft whoever they want next year. So I guess there's no downside to playing Kyler other than losing a higher draft pick, which Joshua Dobbs was kind of already playing well enough to eliminate you from that number 1 pick overall contention. So yeah, I don't think there's too much of a risk with Kyler because the alternative is Joshua Dobbs still not giving you that number 1 overall pick. So why not? Why not? Next game here, Broncos versus the Falcons. So it's a big no to Denver as far as should you start, because no. The only one who might be in contention is Courtland Sutton, but Courtland Sutton plays about 62% of his snaps on the left side of the field. And although although Jair Alexander moves around a lot, he does play a lot of his snaps from the left side of the field as well. I don't know if that works opposite wise. I'm just now thinking like the left is not like he should play on the right if Courtland Sutton's playing on the left. I just confused myself with that.
That's something to look into. I honestly don't know how they track that, but I'm not excited about starting Sutton either way.
Yeah, no, but I had this whole thing of like they both lined up on the left. I'm like, oh well, the left is technically not the same on both sides. So I guess he would have to line up on the right because Jay Alexander, the last time he played all of his snaps from the left side of the field, 55 snaps on one side, 0 snaps on the other. Courtland Sutton plays about 60% of his snaps from the left side of the field. So maybe he'll avoid. I don't know. We'll see. He does move around sometimes, Alexander. So who knows? But trying not to get too analytical, Sutton's not a great look. Judy's not a great look. None of these running backs are a great look. On the flip side of the ball, Aaron Jones, he's expected to play in this matchup, a smash spot against the Broncos, allowing the most fantasy points to running backs this year. Are you excited about Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs? And I think we're kind of past the point of Jaden Reed because the second that Christian Watson came back, Jaden Reed kind of got phased out because he'd like to play a lot of 2 tight end sets with Josiah DeGuara and with Luke Musgrave. So Jaden Reed has kind of been phased out a little bit, playing that slot role. But what are your expectations for these wide receivers?
I'm sort of in a wait and see mode, especially Christian Watson. I'm not excited about starting either of them. I think Romeo Dobbs is a flex option. I think Christian Watson is also a flex option. Dobbs is more of the high floor Watson has the ceiling. He'll be the guy that'll break off the long touchdown if needed. And we've seen that explosiveness in, I think, what has he played, 2 games so far? We've seen it. So, or I'm comfortable saying this guy is your wide receiver 2 every week.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's a messy situation for Christian Watson. It seemed like they really tried to get him involved deep. Last game, he ended up getting one of the deep catches, but they were trying to hit him on a couple of those deep balls. I'm excited to see what he can do in this matchup and see if that kind of continues to see the thing. We were very excited about the Jordan Love Christian Watson connection, and I really just want to see it in action. Luke Musgrave, in the 2 full games that he's played, he has 15 targets in those 2 games. He played some games earlier, but as far as recent history goes, in the last 2 full games he played, he had 15 targets. Great for the tight end position. It's rare you can see that kind of volume. So if you have him, I'm willing to fire him up as well. Next matchup here, we got the Chiefs versus Chargers. Really don't have too much to say here other than Pacheco's reign has continued. He's got 22 touches, playing 63% of the snaps. He had 78.6% of the backfield touches last week. Pacheco is here to stay as a running back 1. I think I just kind of like everyone in this matchup against, except Quentin Johnston. Now, talk to me a little bit about Quentin Johnston. What should you do if you have him? Is he a waste of a bench spot? Is he a big game waiting to happen? I mean, we know he's a raw player, but is it worth keeping him on your bench at this point?
I do think it's worth noting that I think it's important noting that he's a raw player, because I did your prospect coming into the draft, but I wasn't expecting much this year. Now he's sort of been thrusted into a role with Mike Williams out for the season. And I will say, I think he's getting a bit of tough love on Twitter right now. I don't think it was nearly as bad as what people are making it out to be over there. I did see a couple plays where he was open in the limited snaps that he's been playing, but I'm not, I'm certainly not starting him. If you're in a league with a small bench, it's probably time to drop him, but standard leagues, standard sized benches, he's a good bottom bench spot just in case, because as you said, I don't know if I'd say he's a big game waiting to happen, but that's a possibility. Is if Quentin Johnston were to be relevant, he would be a big game guy. He wouldn't be sort of the high floor necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're able to, I think he's worth staying on your bench. Otherwise, if you need that spot desperately, then I think it's okay enough to drop him. Also, Saquon Barkley officially off the injury report. This is the good part about doing this on Fridays. We get these reports as we're recording, as opposed to doing this Thursday and just speculating. We get to see all these things. This one I'm just going to breeze past because I think the only message here is just Eagles versus Dolphins. Start him. Start him. Yeah, should I start? Start him. Swift, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert, freaking Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts. Start him. Tua, Raheem, Tyreek, obviously, Jalen Waddle, start him. Like there's no really questions to be had, especially with 6 bye weeks. I don't see how any of these guys are on your bench. Now, that being said, there are always games where it seems like this is going to be the shootout of all life, and then for some reason it just turns into a defensive battle. So I don't know. Grain of salt, tiniest grain of salt, but this is looking like a pretty big matchup. Last one here, Vikings versus 49ers. This is looking like one of those games where Kirk Cousins is going to have to throw the ball like 50 times. I'm going to fire up all the pass catchers, being Osborne, Addison, and being TJ Hawkinson. I really like Brandon Ayuk in this matchup as well, with CMC and Debo banged up. I think he's going to see a lot of extra targets. Talk to me a little bit about this game and who you're excited for. What do you do if you have Christian McCaffrey? What do you do if you have Debo?
Jordan Addison, I'm excited about. I know you mentioned him. We sort of mentioned him in the little game before, but he is. We know they want him to be the guy. I still think T.J. Hawkinson is really the guy right now, but we know Kevin O'Connell wants to get him involved. I do think he's going to be more involved than KJ Osborne going forward. And this is, as you said, a matchup that's going to see a lot of volume, so the volume should go to him. All signs are pointing to that. And I trust Kevin O'Connell saying that a lot more than I trust Dan Campbell saying that about Jahmyr Gibbs. So I am excited about Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson, I mean, he could be the tight end one any given week at this point. He's the focal point of that offense. From the San Francisco side, Brandon Ayuk, you're firing him up. Brock Purdy loves throwing the ball to him. Everybody else, meh. Deebo Samuel, I don't know. I know he's been banged up, but it just seems like he just seems like a secondary, or really the third guy behind McCaffrey and Ayuk. Now that Ayuk's sort of taken that passing role over from him, I kind of miss the days where they were using Deebo as a running back just because he was getting involved. He's not getting involved anymore. I think George Kittle is another one. George Kittle's just an afterthought at this point. I don't think anybody saw that one coming, but he's really an afterthought at this point.
Yeah, the offense is basically Christian McCaffrey and then a sprinkle of Brandon Ayuk. Outside of that, it's just not really anyone that you can trust. But guys, that's going to do it for our Week 7 video. As always, a reminder, check out Underdog, use code ANALYST. You're going to match your first deposit up to $100. Yeah, that's it. So thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next time. Peace.